WBOC is proud to present a special program looking back at an important chapter in Delmarva's past, to a time before the Civil Rights Movement, before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a public bus, before Martin Luther King Jr. told the world about his dreams, a time when Delmarva suddenly found itself dealing with civil rights. 58 years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court made one of its most monumental decisions, Brown versus the Board of Education. And Delaware did play a significant role in the decision changing America's race relations forever. But those early days did not come easy.
By the third day, the crowds began to build outside. I was just mad, I guess, that this was happening in 1954. Our parents had our back. They motivated us every morning. Don't quit, hang in there. You can do it.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Fueling the fire was this man, an anti-integrationist from across the bay.
As long as we have the will of the majority of people with us that believe in separation of the races, we will win.
Using a flatbed truck as his stage to spread his message. Tonight, we will look at the way we were then and the way we are now. A lesson, one many people may not have heard. A lesson that set the stage for equal education. And now, Desegregating Delaware. Here's Steve Hammond.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. Our story begins in 1954. At the time, when it came to educating black children and white children, the law of the land was separate but equal. But in 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that separate but equal was unconstitutional. And that's really what opened the doors for the first time for black children and white children to go to school together. And one of the first integration efforts happened right here at what was once Milford High School. Now, the story won't have a happy ending, at least not in 1954. But before we get to that point, let's take a step back, because this all started with that landmark ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court. The integration efforts at Milford High School came about after the legendary Supreme Court decision known as Brown versus the Board of Education. That iconic case is actually 5 separate cases combined into one, and Delaware is 1/5 of that case. Public schools in Delaware were separate but equal by law. Dr. Bradley Skelcher is the Associate Provost at Delaware State University and recognized historian in Delaware Black history.
The 1898 Constitution of Delaware that clearly outlined separate but equal educational systems in Delaware, one for African American children and one for white children.
That's until 1952, when 2 African American families fought back. The families file lawsuits arguing the all-black schools like these are inferior to the all-white schools, and that got the attention of state leaders.
As a result of their assessments, they saw that the African American schools were dilapidated. They were falling apart in some very, very rough conditions.
The 2 young girls at the heart of those cases were Shirley Beulah and Ethel Belton. Belton traveled 90 minutes to school in Newcastle County, getting bused into the city to an all-black school rather than attend an all-white school in the town where she lived. Also in Newcastle County, Shirley Beulah needed a ride to school every day because under state law, she's not allowed to get on a white school bus. Both parents seek counsel from civil rights lawyer Lewis L. Redding. He is the first African-American lawyer accepted into the Delaware bar. And the tides were already changing in Delaware. In 1950, Lewis Redding had already won a case requiring the University of Delaware to integrate. In 1952, the same judge, Chancellor Seitz, presides over these 2 cases. Redding uses fire insurance documents that assess the price of the buildings like these to show the court the extreme differences in cost between the all-white schools you see on the left and the black schools you see on the right. Chancellor Seitz finds that the separate institutions in Delaware were, in fact, not equal.
Chancellor Seitz did review both of the schools and concluded and rendered a decision that they were separate and unequal.
The Delaware School Board appeals the decision unsuccessfully. The Delaware Supreme Court upholds the original decision. And at this point, the two cases are combined with the four other cases nationally, and collectively they become known as Brown versus the Board of Education. Delaware is the only state where the black families won their cases. 2 years later, on May 17, 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court strikes down the separate but equal doctrine, and for the first time in Delaware history, black students can attend white schools. Downstate, the small town of Milford becomes a pilot program for integration. In 1954, there were more than 5,000 people living in Milford, and census data estimates 16% were African American.
Milford School Board looked at Brown's decision and made a decision to that the school district had to comply with Brown 1, and so prepared for the integration of the school by admitting 11 African American students to the high school, the all-white high school in Milford.
And it all happened very quickly and very quietly.
One of the criticisms of the school board was that they didn't open this up to the general public. It was almost as if it was a secret, and when the school year started, the 11 African American students were there.
The first day was very quiet, very calm.
Orlando Camp was one of those 11 students. Now in his 70s, he's recently opened up about his experiences at Milford High School in 1954.
We were excited about that because what it meant is that for the first time we would get an equal education in terms of what the white kids were going through.
And the excitement of starting a new school overshadowed any worry about fitting in.
Anxious but not scared, because a lot of the students, the white students, especially the guys, the boys, we knew them from the summers because we would swim with them, play baseball together and so forth. And so we had some connection with the white community back in 1954.
The Milford 11 were the graduating class of Benjamin Banneker Middle School. The all-black school provided the best education it could to the students, but Camp says the hand-me-down books made it difficult to keep up with the curriculum in the all-white schools. And on day one, the Milford 11 learned their education was behind their white counterparts.
The interesting thing is that when we looked at the textbooks, they were teaching Algebra 1 and 2. We hadn't even had Algebra 1. So we were behind in terms of the information that we were getting from the all-black school. So that was one of the first real challenges that we had. And we asked the teachers, well, look, we don't understand this, we haven't had this. Well, and the response is that you're going to have to get some outside help because I can't hold the class back for you students, for you 11 students.
But the Milford 11 wouldn't stay a secret for long.
By the third day, the crowds began to build outside. And these were protesters, that we did not want these black kids going to our school for the first time. And they kept building and building and building as we kept going. And we had to go through what I consider a gauntlet of people to get to our classes. So imagine someone in 1954 trying to get an education, yet walk through these crowds and be called all kinds of names and all kinds of accolades about how negative they felt we were going to be.
Hundreds, then thousands gathered outside of the school protesting the integration effort. The situation becomes so intense the school is forced to shut down for a week. Before the students returned to school, lawyer Lewis L. Redding sent a telegram to Delaware Governor Caleb Boggs asking for police protection for the students. The next day, the 11 school children were escorted to Milford by state police officers.
We couldn't get local police to take us to school because they lived in the community, and they were very concerned about how this would look if they showed any kind of friendship towards us whatsoever, so they had to get the state police to come pick us up. Well, we were alone, and you can imagine a black guy riding around in a police car for the first thing in the morning, what the feeling was and the emotion was.
Camp says even light bulbs were used to intimidate.
They were designed to scare us like there were gunshots being fired at us. And they would throw them on the ground and make this popping sound. And we would jump and scare us.
Home wasn't even a refuge from the resistance.
They would call us on our party line and just call us all kinds of names and then hang up and all night long. So we finally took the phone off the hook because there was so much protest against us.
But they wouldn't give up.
We decided, got together as a group and said, look, we're gonna win this one. We're gonna fight this one. We're gonna do our best to get this education that's given to us for the first time in history.
Parental support and guidance from local civil rights leaders kept them going.
Our parents had our back. They motivated us every morning. Don't quit, hang in there. You can do it. I understand what you're going through.
When we come back,
I would like to repeat the name of the organization. I would not like to have it confused with any other color. It's the National Association for Advancement of White People.
we introduce you to the man who fanned the flames in Milford into an all-out boycott. Welcome back. Tensions in Milford are already flaring. Parents are starting to protest out here outside the school. But things got even worse when a man with no connection to the area came to town and ignited what was already a volatile situation. This is Bryant Bowles. According to published reports at the time, he was a used car salesman from Baltimore with a shady past, including going AWOL twice when he was in the military. Though it's never been confirmed, the story that has been passed down for more than 50 years is this. It was a white parent who discovered a black student asked a white student to go to a pep rally or a dance together. That parent called Bryant Bowles, who at the time was across the bay touting his new initiative, the National Association for the Advancement of White People. Well, on September 26, 1954, Bowles held a massive rally at the Harrington Airport in Kent County. He stands on the back of a flatbed truck with nothing but a microphone and a collection hat, and convinced 1,500 people from across the state of Delaware to keep their children home from school until the state stopped the integration efforts.
Let them go their way and leave us alone, and we will go our way and never bother them. We never will. I come from a part of the country where we have as many colored people as white people. And no one has ever pushed them around or run over them. And so far, we have never let any of them starve to death. We have fed them well. First, I would like to repeat the name of the organization. I would not like to have it confused with any other color. The National Association for Advancement of White People. The people out there have asked me to announce that they are in favor if any Negro walks into any school anywhere in Delaware Monday, that to have a statewide walkout in the school. I don't have a child to take out, but if I did, I'd be right there with you. But any of you may borrow my car if you need transportation to go get yours.
Even young Orlando Camp wanted to hear what the smooth-talking, cult-like figure Bryant Bowles had to say.
I saw him face to face on several occasions, but he never saw me. And we were hiding in the fields outside of Harrington just to listen to him for a few minutes. And then we said, look, it's probably a little bit too dangerous to stay here. So we got up and we left.
But now this story is about to go global as national and international press descend on Milford.
There were reporters there, newspapers from the Soviet Union covering this. There was the national press was here. Even Richard Nixon, on a campaign visit to, political campaign visit to Wilmington, made a plea to the people of Milford to stop the boycott. And his plea was that this is not right, we shouldn't be doing this. And furthermore, we're fighting a Cold War. And look how we're behaving in Milford.
What starts as a grassroots campaign to keep black children out of white schools becomes a movement throughout the entire state.
Seaford, Delaware started keeping them home today. I think they should have a hand.
It spread throughout southern Delaware, that boycott, and several other schools joined in and had mock elections and voted not to integrate. And so you saw it just spreading.
And suddenly the protesters become too powerful and the integration has to come to an end.
I think the last few days probably told us that this was the end. It's got out of hand. Our lawyer, Louis L. Redding, told us that we're going to have to ask for protection. It's getting worse. It's no longer light bulbs. It's now rocks, throwing things at us, and we felt very strongly that it's going to escalate, and somebody's going to get hurt.
The question becomes, would this integration attempt have ended differently if Brian Bowles had not come into town?
If it wasn't Brian Bowles, it would have been someone else, in my humble opinion. But I think Brian Bowles did something. He just looked at the community and said, look, I can make this happen for you.
There didn't seem to be a Brian Bowles figure emerging out of there were people, political figures who would rise up and try to incite resistance to integration, but really no one with the charisma of a Brian Bowles.
Brian Bowles was arrested and charged in Kent and Sussex counties for what amounted to keeping kids out of school. He was tried and found not guilty in both cases.
I've yet to run into anyone quite like Brian Bowles. I must say, I've never seen anyone like him.
According to published reports, Bowles eventually ended up in Texas with his second wife. He got into some kind of altercation with his brother-in-law, who he shot and killed. He spent 16 years in prison for the crime, and Bowles died in 1997, just 2 years after he was paroled for a second time. The failure at Milford played a huge role in the desegregation decisions that followed.
I think it was a significant factor in the Brown 2 decision. I know the court was looking at how especially the southern states would react to Brown 1.
And what happened in Milford certainly affected all 11 students for years to come.
Small town, Steve. That's what happens in a small town. Things move very slowly. I left, as soon as I graduated from high school, I left Milford. I was very disappointed with the city in the state of Delaware, and I came back many, many years later. I just felt, that this was not the place for me because Milford had too many memories, too many negative memories of what was going on. And many of the Milford 11, as I interviewed them later on for the story for my book, were very upset. In fact, a few of them would not even talk to me initially about this integration. They just cut it off completely.
And on his quest to write his memoir, Camp details the difficulty he had finding anyone who would admit they were part of the protest.
I know time changes people and changes things, so I'm pretty sure a lot of people looked at this and maybe had a change of heart, real change. But to talk about it on a past life and how they felt was pretty daunting.
There's now a plaque at what was once Milford High School to commemorate the Milford 11. But the only name you'll find on the plaque is Brian Bowles, perhaps because the legacy left behind by the Milford 11 is more intangible than a plaque.
Many students come up to me and say, thank you. Thank you for what you went through. You made it possible for me to feel good about what I'm doing in terms of education. And black and white students, and I feel proud about that. And that makes me feel good that all this did take place. That's my legacy, that never give up. It's never too late. Change comes.
When we come back,
he made it.
Mission accomplished.
We meet the first African-American students who graduated from Milford High School. Welcome back. It took 11 years for Milford High School to fully integrate, and in 1965, the first African-American students earned their diplomas from here. And unlike the Milford 11, in '65, the students were welcomed in these halls. There was no community backlash, and on graduation day, they finished what the Milford 11 started, and they happily called themselves the Milford 7.
When we graduated in 1965, I guess there was a sense of joy, adulation. He made it.
Mission accomplished.
Meet Charles Hammond. He's one of the first black students to graduate from Milford High School in 1965. And that's Timothy Duger alongside Josephus Clark and Gregory Showell. These four men have known each other their whole lives.
We've discussed it at every level. We discussed being together when we were 12 years old. We discussed it when we were younger, at 20 years old. And now we're sitting here in our mid-60s and we're still discussing it. And that's really something special.
They were just young kids when their town turned into a place of protest. And while they weren't part of those struggles, they certainly knew something was going on.
You hear rumblings and you have parents somewhat educated as to what was going on. But again, it really didn't faze us.
Being 7 years old, 6 years old, we're out just having fun.
But 11 years later, the times were changing and the town was evolving.
People knew, like I said, that things were only going to move forward, and they were prepared for that. And we were their hope at that time, especially after the first go-round, that we were the hope of actually continuing what the considered Milford 11 actually started.
And this time, even the town was ready.
So that was common among the people in the area, that this is the time.
And the teachers were ready too.
We had that good foundation from Banneker. We had those teachers out there that worked with us, literally day in and day out.
Accomplishing something seemingly unthinkable just 10 years before.
We were just proud kids, and we said whatever we did, we're going to do it well. And that's just the way we were brought up.
Yeah, that
and
was
that's
the culture.
And that's just the way we kept it in our mind. No one can beat us doing anything.
And they also give credit to the Milford 11 who paved the path for their education.
I think we are grateful for the fact that they did take the first step to open those doors at Milford High. We refer to them to the Milford 11, and we're the 7. And, there's some commonality there. And I think they are just as proud of us as we are proud of them.
When we come back,
we want to honor the Milford 11 tonight.
Finishing what they started 58 years ago. A look at the Milford 11 graduating from Milford High School. This past May, the Milford 11 finished what they started 58 years ago when they graduated from Milford High School.
At this time, with the Milford 11, please rise.
The Milford 11 received honorary degrees during a special presentation at the beginning of the 2012 commencement ceremony. For Orlando Camp and his 6 other surviving classmates, it was better late than never.
And I think the people that read the story and heard the background and heard the emotion in the story decided that this is something that we really should take a look at. And I got to thank Sharon Cantor and others that said, you know what, we're going to give you your diploma for the first time after 58 years. A little late, but we're happy to receive it.
Camp says it was Milford School Superintendent Sharon Cantor who had the idea to hand out diplomas.
I think as we showed the students that got their diplomas on May 24th, that history was in the making, that we righted the wrong that occurred back in 1954. And when I spoke at the graduation, I said, we're righting this wrong. And the students wanted it to happen.
Some of the Milford 11 came from across the country to receive their degrees. Family members marched in the procession for those who had passed.
The ones that could come did come, and the ones that had friends that passed away, their next of kin came. So it was a proud moment for us to stand on that football field on the 24th of May and get a diploma, because it says that things will change.
Please join us in celebrating the Milford 11.
And in the crowd cheering on the newest Milford High graduates, the members of the first integrated graduating class.
It was awesome. It was long overdue, but we were there to support them. It wasn't about us, it was about them.
And it's moments like this special ceremony that shed light on what really happened in Milford back in 1954, educating the future generation, like those graduating from Milford High, about the sometimes dark and little-known piece of Delaware history.
In small towns, I think, like Milford, things have moved slowly. But I think there's enough good people, positive thinking people, change people that look for change, look for different ways, and look at the time and say, this is time for us to change. And I think the fact that they gave us diplomas, they didn't have to do that. I mean, it wasn't required, we weren't asking for that. That was something that they came up with and said, look guys, we think you deserve it. The struggle that you went through, it's going to be a form of recognition for your struggle.
For Orlando Camp, the anger is long gone. Now his focus is on telling his story and also helping to break down racial barriers that still exist, whether it's here in Milford or somewhere else in America. Thanks for watching. Good night.